famous guest again. We had him on the show last time, on the investigative committee last Friday already, with like a set of 3 questions. And today he's again with us for some more questions that we have prepared in advance. So I'm excited to greet here again Archbishop Carlo Maria Vigano. And he's apart from being an archbishop, he's also a diplomat emeritus of Vatican City, served as the apostolic nuncio to the United States from October 19th, 2011 through April 12th, 2016. And he's publicized 2 major Vatican scandals. In 2012, he revealed financial corruption in the Vatican, and in 2018, he accused Pope Francis and other church leaders of covering up sexual abuse allegations against former Cardinal Theodore McCarrick. So it's good that you're back with us today, Your Excellency. Can you hear us?
Thank you very much, Madam. I can hear very well.
Okay, perfect. Excellent. So let me just read the first question to you then. Your Excellency, in a letter you sent to then US President Donald Trump, you allude not only to a deep state, a term which is widely used, but also to a deep church. What do you mean by that, and how might these structures be related?
Catholic Church, just as the deep state is to the state. They are both a corrupted and perverted version of the institution that they hold hostage, in which they have infiltrated. The members of the deep church are all the more unknown, the greater their power. The most public personalities are almost always marionettes who are docile to those who pull the strings. Biden and Bergoglio are the front men of the ideology that unites them, a mixture of Maoist collectivism, Masonic liberalism, and conciliar ecumenism, which nods to the politically correct issues of gender and the LGBTQ agenda. It should, however, be reiterated that the deep state and the deep church are only 2 declinations of the same subversive dogma that has appropriated power by the subverting authority and perverting its ends. In the natural order, the state has as its end good governance and the common good of its citizens. The traitor of the deep state have made it an enemy of the honest persons and the accomplice of criminals. In the supernatural order, the church has its end the government of the faithful and the sanctifications of souls. The traitors of the deep church condemn those who preserve faith and morals, and instead publicly praise heretics, sodomites, abortionists, usurers, assassins, and criminals. But let me be clear. If the delusional plans of these traitors include the destruction of the state and the church by means of the demolition or corruption of those who hold authority in both the one and the other. We know well that while a nation, culture, language, and civilization can even disappear, in the case of the Holy Church, our Lord's promise remains valid forever. Parte inferi non prevalebunt adversus eam. The gates of hell shall not prevail over the church. We must not think that the earthly fortunes of the church should be judged according to the merely human parameters, but rather we ought to have the certainty that the Lord will protect his church ut pupillam oculi, like the pupil of the eye.
Well, thank you for this answer. I read the next question. An objection from those who reject such a thing as a conspiracy theory would be this. How is it possible that in almost all countries of the world, almost all politicians participate in this charade? Who could have so much power and influence that they could send half the world into seclusion?
The objection against those who support the theory of a global conspiracy is legitimate and understandable, because each of us has been rightly educated to a shared system of values and principles that we still take for granted. For example, that the son should trust his father, that the student can place trust in the teacher, that the patient can rely on the doctor to be treated, that those who see a right violated can obtain justice from an impartial tribunal, that the needy can hope in the compassion and charity of others, that the citizen has rulers who have his guardians and protector, that the faithful can listen with confidence to the voice of their shepherds, the shepherds of the church, as if it were the voice of Christ himself, that the reader is not deceived by the gatekeepers of information, that the customer should not fear being cheated by the shopkeeper, that people who dine at the restaurants should not fear being poisoned by the owners. In this system, the authority of the father, the teacher, the doctor, the judge, and the ruler refers to the authority of God, who is Father, Master, Judge, and King. It is evident that the work of dissolution of Christian society, which still is Christian in its roots, even if it now retain only scant traces of its Christianity, is motivated by Satan's unquenchable hatred against Christ. But what happens if, through a constant effort lasting more than 200 years, the enemy infiltrated schools, courts, institutions, seminaries, companies, and trade unions, and gradually conquered the highest level of leadership, taking order from the same group of power that commands everyone either by blackmail or reward? In the face of the evidence of such a subversion.
Now, I'm just going to hold that for a second, folks. Once again, this is the date. We're now into the afternoon portion. And once again, we are hearing from Archbishop Carlo Maria Vigano, and who knows, runner up for the New World Pope. Like I'm talking the People's Pope, because this brother, as apparently in Christ, is bringing it out, right? So once again, of course, within the post that I did end that note with the prayer, right, to stop wars. Well, there's also the war of the mind, right? And how the mind and minds of folks have been put together. So I paused it particularly because this is the actual truth of the matter. Within the last 200 years, the enemy, hey, got infiltrated into, like I was mentioning, even to the industrial level, devil levels, as I call them. So let's hear what this bro has to say. Actually, I implore you, hey, we'll do a Google, not a Google search, but a wiki search on his background, right? Because we never hear about this. We never hear about those good, be it not, if it's not, still in its own, some people are saying very highly demonic realm, right? In his case, part of that whole Vatican jam, right? The Vatican City crew, right? Coming out with this. So I've always said it. It's not just one isolated infighting of gender. It's religion. It's infighting that is not worth actually fighting about, because it's all about what the enemy is, right? And that's confusion, following, not following the commandments, sacrifice, all this business. And he got woke on it. My question would be is, what's he still doing in it, right? But the fact that he's bringing it up, like, aren't they like, you would think the Vatican, like, what? I'd be watching my back. But maybe he's going with the spirit. So once again, we have to decipher everything with discernment. Big up to Vivian Fisher and Fulmic for putting this on the trial. And this, of course, is the Corona Investigative Committee. And this is, of course, well, some would say it's the practice trial before they bring the shit down, but this is all the testimonies. So, welcome back. And let's hear the, like, just a night, and I'll give you a few minutes because there's another clip I'm going to show you before we move on and talk about Pan Africanism.
Courts, institutions, seminaries, companies, and trade unions, and gradual evolution of Christian society, which still is Christian in its roots, even if it now retain only scant traces of its Christianity, is motivated by Satan's unquenchable hatred against Christ. But what happens if, through a constant effort lasting more than 200 years, the enemy infiltrated schools, courts, institutions, seminaries, companies, and trade unions, and gradually conquered the highest level of leadership, taking order from the same group of power that commands everyone either by blackmail or reward? In the face of the evidence of such a subversion, we must not close our eyes because it seems too incredible not to have noticed it before.
Thus, we call it a miracle, miraculous, right? Miraculous. Curing what? Being what? Existing, yes. Let's challenge the existence to its fullest. And hey, we're not saying it's all bad, but the spirit of it has been infiltrated without, hey, I guess one of the basic diets that Yeshua was talking about, like love for one another, right? But when you don't have a soul, this is what part of the issue is. And of course, that's always been an issue since over 2,000 years, maybe, and go forth, back and forth. And in the last 500, we say, but this brother breaks it down to say, hey, it's still going on. And 200 of our lifetimes, which even the, let's say, the boomer who's still around, would have been at least in for knowledge about those 100 years by a grandparent. So it's not that far, right? 200 years is literally, now is the 21st century, it would have been at least in the mid 1700s, right? All around those Civil War times and whatnot, right? And thus we know about the whole Masonic orders that popped off, and especially during the Age of Enlightenment and then the Age of Romanticism, Roman, right? All right, anyway, let me hit it, bro, here.
Instead,
I'm going to tune it up back. Hold
we
on.
must have the court.
Listen to what he
The
says.
enemy infiltrated schools, courts, institutions, seminaries, companies, and trade unions, and gradually conquered the Huscan trace
And I gotta say this.
of his Christianity.
Hold on, buddy. Even if you talk about, you see, he's like Christianity. And the key thing, the key takeaway here, you see, like what a lot of these churches you don't know, like I've mentioned it in previous posts, like if you go to Russia, and I'm sure, I don't care what anybody going to tell you about what's going on in the world right now. And it's pretty far out, but you know, if you go out, if you've been out there, their churches is a black Jesus, eh? With all the apostles and all that all that stuff. What? It's like, how did that get there? That's a deep, like, rabbit hole. Yeah, and we already know they've tried to call it, what they call it is whitewash. You had the Orthodox. Anyway, why, how did this all come to be? Is, you know, and then fast forward, now you have these guys with their infighting and the practices that they did not obey or they were supposed to obey with the commandments, right? So you know, we who have ears, let him see, right? Who have ears, that's a good one. But it's true. If you have ears and you can see, he who, you know, you could take it and twist it any way you want. He who have ears, let him hear. Hear, you know? He who have eyes, let them see. Be wise. This bro is telling you, right? You don't have to be, I mean, but he's just one. I'm sure there's more. But that fact that this is and this guy goes deep, eh? He talks about the whole thing. So I'm like, okay, this is where we have to once again pull away. Remember the planetary look, right? The planes. This guy is significant. So listen to what he says. I'm going to continue and we'll show another quick one of him and then we'll move on. Listen.
In this system, the authority of the father, the teacher, the doctor, the judge, and the ruler refers.
Even if it's like you can question it all you want, don't be mofo hard headed. This is not a nigger right here. Even if it seems, and this is what happens. You know, you have a lot of folks, like I said, you might even have the folks who, on both left and right, are not perfect. But for the first time, we're seeing that it is something bigger that's being disguised through politics. So yeah, you're going to probably have a lot of gangsta biker type, ex-clan, renouncing because God is greater than all that fucking, a lot of people who survive it, they realize it's weak shit. But now also the attack, it's something that's being, you know, bestowed upon us by grace, as some would say, even though it sucks, to see how much endurance we can have, such as Christ, which one of the things, big takeaway is how is it he could be on the cross and be resurrected? Well, the power of God does that. And he probably didn't feel, if he did feel pain, not enough pain to kill or to physically knock him out. Even if he got helped by another bro, right? Simon, he was still able to bring his own cross up the hill. And then he didn't get tapped out by the nailing in the cross. And if, let's say if this was a fable, we do know some specific facts. People were that was the punishment for people. So we got that right, right? If you look it up, people were like, hey, he even had two bros next to him. What the guy who was the choice? They said, let's go. I'm no priest, like I said, but if it's Barabbas, if I'm correct, yeah, him. What are you gonna? Yeah, like yo, we'll go for him, Barabbas or me, or the people went for the criminal. Even Barabbas, I'm sure, was like, "What? You guys are like, wait a minute, wait a minute. I'm not even like this, bro. Come on now. Even I know I gotta go some minute. I gotta step. But hey, since you say, all right, take the chains off later, bro. Hey, catch me later, eh? Right? And then Jesus is like, yeah, okay, I got you. Don't worry about that. I don't know about this other nigga next to me though. I don't know. Did he actually survive that? No, I think he got his ass whipped up in that. Whipped, dipped, and chipped. So, comedy aside, don't be hard headed. Listen. Even if it's like, there's a message.
To the authority of God, who is Father, Master, Judge, and King, it is evident that the work of dissolution of Christian society, which still is Christian in its roots, even if it now retain only scant traces of its Christianity, is motivated by Satan's unquenchable hatred against Christ. But what happens if, through a constant effort lasting more than 200 years, the enemy infiltrated schools, courts, institutions, seminaries, companies, and trade unions, and gradually conquered the highest level of leadership, taking order from the same group of power that commands everyone either by blackmail or reward?
And I wanted to throw in here. This is one of the, I believe, the biggest takeaway. So he talks about the enemy, right? Now, that enemy is not like a specific, uh, walking around with horns. So we at least want to believe, unless they get, now we know, we've known plastic surgeons can put all kinds of stuff on people's body. They can get horns, hoofs, anything. Anyway, moving on, right? They even have this fetish of chopping limbs off. Oh, they got all that. They got anything we can dream up in our darkest senses and dreams. We can do it. I'm sure the humanity has done it, right? And this guy's talking in the sense of the enemy infiltrating basically that same structure of the system that was actually, once again, part and partial developed with the industrial age, and then of course now with the whole military industrial, thus wars, how realistic in real time and photographed, recorded, painted as in that real time for where they were, pull back the camera, right? And there's something to be said about that, why those folks were there, why, how they ended up there, how they ended up having to go and recruit, because it was broadcasted that you had to join the military. It was probably bigger than even what other wars was going on, right? By the time the radio came around, right? It's like go, you had the movies, which movies as I call them, which have been around probably even before. Like they claim they invented it. They probably stole it from the hood. They said, "Yo, give me the celluloid thing that you blow up and shit." Same thing with photography. But I digress. The reason why I stopped this particular point, and I'll just replay it one more time. Welcome to the date. Thank you for tuning in. Give a thumbs up, like, share, all that. Give me pay some coffee. Shout out to those who did. Like I said, it's just like I'm just throwing it out there. At least this is my giving back as a bro, right? So here it is. Twist it back just a few more seconds. He's saying the infiltration. So don't be hard headed. Don't be a dumbass. Figure this out. What he's saying is what we see is playing out every day. It just probably amplified, and it's even more amplified by a younger, more naive generation. Don't forget, we're a young generation altogether. The boomers now being the seniors, which is like not that much of a long time coming, but they've been in their senior years officially. If if it was 1945, right? And now it's like god darn like 80, near that. What if give or take more for many? The generation gap ended for them by 1960. What is it? 64? Don't quote me yet, because but I'm a Gen Xer, so it's 65. And, X marks the spot, right? So up until 1964, 65, right? A lot of things changed, and especially in the churches, right? Because that was prime time. You had all these churches, which these buildings were probably made way before. I never get enough, or maybe I'll do a post on how these big buildings were made, right? Because the intricate design of a church, if you've been inside a church, especially if you see the paintings, how the intricate design, intricacy, I guess if you could say it. Maybe I'm saying it wrong, but that deep, right? On simple earth, digging up from the foundation. So, like I said, don't be an idiot. Listen to what this guy's saying. What he's saying is, even today in this contemporary world, whether it be 200 years, maybe in a full effect in the last, what, since 1974, as recent as the 1990s, when they got the students from the colleges and university all hyped up by design, by plan, by birth, by, uh, let's say, molecular experimentation, by uh, intravenous birth, right? Hey, they did it before. We just been dumbed down and the commercialization. So what this bro here, bro Carlo, is saying, right? At least maybe he'll probably be for sure venerated to be some saint or something if he's right. God pray for him. And even if he's the mole or if it's part of the biggest picture, to let us know. I believe not both sides, good and bad, could corroborate to make the world this difficult, even if it's got to be good versus bad, right? So if the conspiracy is that there are people who are saying shit to just add to the big plan of causing the demise and a break of people and end of the world, right? And then you already have a bad side that's there to make it bad, right? It's kind of, God couldn't put a curveball like that because that's why we have a good and an evil. So there are probably way more good than evil. So this bro saying that's been infiltrated. How? Well, highly likely by the people who tell us how to think, which is like, the people who put out the cameras and the pictures out there and tell you what is the news of the times since that beginning of times, and education, and possibly, highly likely, medication, which has gone on with the pharma. Yeah, all of that. He said it's been infiltrated. So what does that mean? Infiltrated by what? By who? Just regular Joe, maybe. Yeah, regular Mary, right? No matter where they come from, any part of the world, whatever they believe. But there's probably something significantly different about how this this big planet is being run in small little bushes and condos and offices and, as we were saying, geometrically designed structures where they can actually go there, go in basements, go all over and suck up some energy as a group, like the 2030 and whatever they call them, whatever elected office, and boom, run things. That too can have people, they don't, well, no one prays in school, they don't mean it, right? And while even the religion itself, that all of this is payback, right? So he probably picked up on it. He probably definitely said, look, this too, what's going to go down with the church, because I'm sure there's so much more. He's saying we've all been corrupted, and thus, and this is the kick away, the big kick away here, takeaway, kick away is, how does this make us culpable, the average person, accountable to the Lord's judgment? So, my takeaway, don't, quote me or not, is that part of the maybe mind washing and convincing is that by proxy, even if we do sin and do the worst sin we can, we're irredeemable. So therefore, one could even be irredeemable, and there's no level of that, but we cannot judge. So we have no more judgment. So that becomes faulty. It's all been corrupted. And there's the doctrines that support that. So if you believe in that kind of the molecular, as I call it, doctrine that's been around with the sciences, and hey, that's cool. There's good. The Lord never said, hey, you know what? You got spiritual gifts. He did say you got them, and you got them because I gave them to you. But hey, there's some niggas out there that'll fuck that up, and they'll be like, I want to have more money, and that's God saying, okay, you chose that, you roll with that. We see it right through the whole biblical thing, right? Solomon, King David, no matter how much, or it's not Solomon, it's not Saul, yeah, Saul going after King David, young kid took out the giant antenna, the right between the eye. That's how I read that, right? The little man, the kid taking out that big antenna and his crew. But anyway, eventually Saul got whacked, right? Because he was like, why are you jealous of David? Anyway, I digress, right? King David. So here we are today. There's no King Davids. There's no. It's like we probably have a lot of Sauls. We probably have a lot of every all of those characters. Even to some degree, who was it? The Pharaoh is the. You see, I'm not that deep. I'm just going with the spirit here, even though I know it. But but the is it the Pharaoh who tried to block Moses, right? Look what happened to them. They were like, "You can't go, you can't go." This kid got yeah, right, and he ended up with nobody. He listened to his wife. You know what? Yeah, Pontius Pilate. The wife is like, "Hey, I got a dream last night, and this is gonna go down, eh?" And he was like, "Well, what can I do?" Well, he washed his hands, eh? Not in blood, but he washed his hands. I'm out of this, bro. It's you niggas out there that want that. I personally don't hate him. I don't know them. He seemed like he's kind of cool. Maybe he's homeless. We don't know what time it is with it. But right now, I feel good. I don't feel good about you people. You guys got some bad vibes. And you let the biggest criminal, biggest fucking rapist, killer, all this free over this guy? What? I don't know. I don't want to be part of that karma. So maybe, just maybe, Pontius Pilate was kind of like, maybe God gave that bro a pass. He's like, I can't say that you were put in that situation because the enemy put you there, right? But at the end, you still tried to warn my people. So yeah, and on top of that, you were like, you told them, are you guys really sure? I don't think. And they were like, yeah, yeah, crucify him. And next thing you know, da 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 da. He's like, no, man, I'm sure he must pray, whatever happened to the rest of his life, even though it probably got funky as a result, the big picture with the wars and everything, right? So Carlo here is saying Carlo Maria. See, here are the names too. Anyway, you heard that, right? That's their name. He says Vigiano, right? Future running for saint or pope. God willing, we'll see, right? Please God, as we say. He's saying it's all infiltrated, this evil, this satanic culture, this feeling, it's generational because it's 200 years, like I said, great grandparents and whatnot, to what is it, how many generations? And then, bam, here we are, right? Living with the seniors who probably long ago, probably might have been even part of this. As in my other post, what you had with Woodstock, right? With Woodstock. So Woodstock happened, and we don't know. I mean, it was good times, but you know what? We don't talk about it much now. One, most of those people are, if not around this world, they're seniors or they're not here, and so much has happened, and a lot of them just got whacked out like nothing happened. All them '60s thing, think about it. It's only if it's not for the rock and roll stars like the few, like the Rolling Stones, right? You wouldn't hear shit. And those are my boys, Keith, like we said, more than the cockroach that will live after the explosion of a few missiles. Keith Richards will be still there. But, anyways, infiltration. So, the complicity that maybe one now, you have a choice, I would say. You have a choice, be aware and say, do you want to leave this world, even though unconsciously? Let's say, for best case scenario, right? When I was working, I saw folks, let's say, give folks their um, their med, right? I'm going to just talk that code. But I knew those folks were probably not as qualified and or many things, like you have to wonder, yeah, you have to think some ethics because that's been there was a time when you had to dress appropriate, look some a certain way to, right? But I know a lot of these folks wasn't that. So one would say, are they, after knowing and hearing this news, all complicit in what's going down and the after effects? Here's what I'm understanding from some of the research. A lot of these folks who even fallen into that understand and saying they're brave enough, not even to say as an apology, but to say, look, it's about accountability first. This is something we haven't Bumbaras seen since, even 9/11. Rest in peace, but it's true. The accountability was off the chain and it started a war, right? That was fake to the point where they made shit up against people who used to work or study with them. Thus, the Saddam and the Osama and all, like think about that. So you would say that shit's already been infiltrated since. So when he says it, I'm just gonna I just felt I had to inject that because that's gonna be the biggest moral dilemma for maybe some people. right? People who said, well, let's say, okay, let's get to the top nitty gritty. The top people who said, okay, we made this shit happen. There's still the possibility that these folks can redeem and pull a Pontius Pilate and say, look, we're not all, there's always those folks who are like, you know what, maybe, because that's how heroes are made. Heroes are not always just all truest. A hero could become from somebody who's probably like completely on the flip. And that's where we're going to be seeing, I believe. I don't predict, but I know it's going to be an interesting Halloween. Get your candy out, right? Get your best costume on. I got to see that. I got to see those costumes, right? I haven't seen Halloween in a while, by the way. That's been what? Way too long, right? What's Halloween? But that's God said way, probably saying, well, those jokers thought they were killing people out by lockdown, so people can't go to Christmas and all these holidays. Ha ha. Maybe you're not supposed to have those holidays. Though, what do you mean we were supposed? But that's people love. Well, you know what? I'd rather you. There you go. I'd rather you go and roll with me, right? I'd rather you focus on me, worshiping me. So that was that's the whole deal with that. That was just me going there. So who's complicit? Who's complicit? Let's say if somebody who's supposed to heal you is complicit indirectly, well, there's the option should be, if you have the right conscience and you're part with us, the people, is hey, unanimously somehow call it as it is. And yes, it's legal stuff and it's a whole deep thing, right? That's why people can even lose interest now because look, it's the end of summer. Labor Day just ended. People still got what they got, right? And even indirectly here, long story short, long COVID, as they call it, yeah, everybody's damaged. Why? Maybe because we didn't listen, but shit's in the air, right? In the water. So whatever that is, God is God causes the miracle still to come out. And that's possibly why a lot of people are still being here. Maybe the God is healing a lot of people. People talk about what's in the blood and we're gonna look into that in a minute. You might not like hearing it, but I'm going to show also some positive points that we can get to that. Just like every tragedy, even like when they had polio, they say, "Oh, we made the shot." Well, you know what? Yeah, maybe it did. Maybe and eventually found out it was monkey stuff. Look that up, right? But at the end of the day, the majority, if you pull back the camera, didn't get that polio, right? It was also in the media, but it was like anyway. It goes down. So this is what this is part of. And it's being repeated again over and over. And most people in this world right now, running this world, might be 19, and that was when just 9/11 happened. Give another 10 years to that, somebody would be, going on 30. So the history is maybe not as close for them, as remote. So if this is like this prayer is out to those now, there's a time to wake and maybe uh, change the destiny of what some other folks said is going to be destined, right? From what they perceive is the right way to go. And when they say they mean well, don't even take that too far no more. Why? Because if you meant well, why do you want to end your, life as it is? Thus, we were reading that before. So I'm going to let that roll and we'll continue on the date. Thank you once again. It's just, I know that even this doesn't even get enough press, not even anything, right? So this is why I'm broadcasting it through here. He's telling you, if you want to listen, whether you believe it or not, conspiracy or not, television, film, books, media, what the whole 9 yards, pull out the camera. He's saying, listen, I'm one simple person. This is the deal. You can either believe it or ignore it. I think it's actually kind of believable only because, right? Nobody wants to kind of play it out anywhere, right? And especially the church. So here, he who have ears, let him hear.
If through a constant effort lasting more than 200 years, the enemy infiltrated schools, courts, institutions, seminaries, companies, and trade unions, and gradually conquered the highest level of leadership, taking order from the same group of power that commands everyone either by blackmail or reward. In the face of the evidence of such a subversion, We must not close our eyes because it seems too incredible not to have noticed it before. Instead, we must have the courage to recognize that too many of our silences have allowed the corrupt city councillor, the depraved parish priest, the dishonest soldier, the ignorant assistant, the unscrupulous doctor, and the lazy employees to be promoted to a parliamentarian.
You heard what he just said, folks? I think that's very mofo deep, deep, deep. That's deep because he's telling you, not from me, I'm just sharing the thought here, right? Carlo, St. Carlo running, provided we get past the 2030, he's calling out law enforcement. He's just telling you, he's like, it's been infiltrated and there's some niggas in there that are ready to wipe us out. Genocide. He's telling us that. He's telling you. And he's saying, in your politics, and it's like, wait a minute. Don't forget, if you're old enough to remember The Omen, maybe it's not just it's about The Omen. Maybe like, because they always say movies are close to reality. I kind of gave up on all those fucking movies, especially with people saying, oh, you get the message there. You know what? Be careful with that too, right? Just like this could be made a movie one day, right? He can be that amazing pope who, or archbishop or future saint in the 80 years God spare life. They make a movie and then put this speech out. But I'm just saying. So hear this once again.
Seems too incredible not to have noticed it before. Instead, we must have the courage to recognize that too many of our silences have allowed the corrupt city councillor, the depraved parish priest, the dishonest soldier, the ignorant assistant, the unscrupulous doctor, and the lazy employees to be promoted to a parliamentarian, bishop, general, professor, or government official, and thus to have made himself blackmailed. In the end, the ones
Blackmailed, okay. A quick hit up on that. Like, okay, so I believe I've covered it in my previous post, but I'm going to give you some research and maybe I'll come back to it at some point in the very near future because it's all relevant, right? With the FBI and how that started. And it was a bro by the name of Maria J. Edgar Hoover. That's what they called them, despite their very interesting relationship with, one of their best partners in crime. And of course, they were busting crime on a moral ground, which was even, the 20s with, the suffragettes, right? Anyway, I can't, the word doesn't come up in my head right now, but that whole abolition of alcohol and then the dirty 30s with the mobs coming in. And then, well, okay. So all of this stuff was happening, right throughout the history up until what 72 when he died. We're just like tots, Gen Xers, and some were just even still young, too young. If you were born in 65 to start to know about Hoover, but people knew about him by even the boomers who this guy was the hustle, the beat down, the shakedown, and now we know. It's one of those things you either accept it and relearn history, which of course that too, the institutions of schools, everything, the history, even books that had been written mostly in part into the what is it, the 20th century. You got to start questioning. Even that's why even now today influencers. That's why you'll know the ones who are being. You're like if you need to make money on these platforms, and even then you're taking such a big cut. I gotta question that. But even then, I know you want to make money, but just freaking goes like you get used to it because you're going to probably be you know just pull the rug from you. This was never meant to be a job. BoobTube was never meant to be a job career for people. When it started, it was like, hey, let's try this out. Look at it now. Enough buyership content created so they can tell you now, okay, we own you. Not only that, we've collected and we're going to add you up, but you're now working for, like I said, our own alphabet of tube. So imagine generations have happened with that already, right? So our bro here is telling you it's been infiltrated without honor and hey, if you either listen to what he's saying and you get it and you can pass this message, right? I'll give you a thumbs up. Give me a thumbs up. Hear it out, and we'll move on.
Counselor, the depraved parish priest, the dishonest soldier, the ignorant assistant, the unscrupulous doctor, and the lazy employee to be promoted to a parliamentarian, bishop, general, professor, or government official, and thus to have made himself blackmailed. In the end,
So blackmail, J. Edgar Hoover, and that whole organization, it was known that they using blackmail essentially means you set someone up. So one of the easiest ways, because people can play, and that's what a lot of this is. Even when they did those MK Ultra, what do you call it, Coin, all that madness, right? At the end of the day, you wonder why it's always about the mind, right? The mind, and to get into the mind and to penetrate the mind, whether it be by drugs, whatnot, and find out an individual, a human being's inhibitions and all this stuff. How dark can you be? So it's like those who want to do those plans in darkness, in secret, want to be able to get and find your darkness. So one of the best ways, hear this, you ready? Camera. Camera everywhere. Camera gets you when you're born and you go to a spelling bee in the year 1810, and camera catches you, what you call got a belt, right? And you're looking like really who you are, and the camera catch you. So J. Edgar Hoover mastered that, because even then with the other wars in Rome, it took people who can write and sketch shit out, right? But the advent of our, maybe it was around before, but as we don't see it around, maybe the type of film didn't last forever. So that could be part of the question. The video signal, even then, maybe, for whatever reason, not everybody was able to get, but maybe it was around. That's why I'm like, it's not impossible. But blackmail is, let's say, in this term, in this sense of what this archbishop is saying, is J. Edgar Hoover, along with others of the same ilk and other organizations throughout that time, were able, and they still do today, except now digitally. Thus, they even want to give you a chip to find out your inner habits already. You can either fight it or not. Most people say, you know what, you're an idiot and a goof anyways for wanting to see how other people get off in life. But that's, hey, we all digress on that. So they try to get everyone guilty. So by that proxy, right? By that associated guilt, you use the beast product. So anyway, blackmail is part of that too. Doxing, that's part of it too, right? They used to call it, what was it? Uh, phone phone porn bribe or whatever they call it. That's blackmail. So a, a government is pretty much set up on a lot of the folks, like this bro was saying here, that get hired up by the time they're there. And we've seen it already play out in front of us, like you've seen with all these sexual harassments. And then on the other hand, they're the folks that exploit that. So then there's some, like, hey, would it be too far to say that it could be from beginning to end for some people to make this shit up? Or you can't make this shit up when you see people like the Weinstein and Woody Allen's run out there. Anyway, I don't want to digress too much, but once again, people got photos, and thus this whole Epstein thing. You think by now, you know what? I've probably seen that list. You know why? Because I believe it's already been on the internet, right? You've probably seen it, you've seen the names. So you either say, well, that's what it is. But no, people are like, when is she going to come out with the list? The fucking list is out there. Really? I mean, we hear the names. It's just that nobody's calling it, right? Because maybe even those folks, maybe there's such, how they say, compromising documented video, digital footage of them doing beyond. And imagine if they're out of eyes wide shut, it's on, right? That's why we heard about those rumors. Well, yeah, whether it be a rap party, a rap orgy, as they call it, back in the day, yeah, they got stuff on, it's like, hey, I'll show that. Oh, no, you can't say, you can't show me eating that person, literally, but I digress. So, blackmail. So, blackmail literally runs. how we say, the fear, right? And it's used as a tool because blackmail. Hey, you know what? You got the goods on somebody who's done something, but that's only by trial according to the person who's blackmailing you, right? So, but even then, if you're in the public eye, like a movie star or whatnot, right? Hey, everybody, the ladies love you. Hey, you found out this guy likes to eat people. What? What do you mean this guy likes to eat people? Well, you know what? He's the one who got busted, but maybe there's others that you. So this is the state we're in. And apparently, like he's just saying, even up in the highest degrees, you've been promoted. So maybe the people who even promote you, they got something on you. But that's why we always say God will be the judge of them, because that's how they're also playing God. And they want to do more. They want to get into your algorithms and all of this, and we can control you. And yeah, yeah, control what? It's all slick oil, and that's what's coming up. So complicity, even by proxy, everyone won't go to hell, but that's what they expect is going to happen, right? Because they're already doomed. They're like, well, you know what? We'll bring them all with us. By the way, if you work in it, and many people fell for it, many folks took the bill, they took the prestige. Maybe they were damaged when they were babies, and that's how they're. But ah, pull back the camera and you'll get to see. I believe there are more people, if they're listening to this, you'll start to understand and say, well, wait a minute. Even if it is or not, this guy's giving, like we say, gold nuggets. This is the great golden herring. He's telling you this is the link of all those, what do you say, human trafficking, which is another ballgame. How the fuck is it like human trafficking can be running around so like, yeah, with 500 there. But you heard the Disney thing. Like, what the fuck's that all about? These people are not that old either. They're like younger than me, probably, right? But that is always about an inside and inside. They said a sheriff. They had this. I'm probably this. Like, come on, man. I ever wondered what happened to those kids in Guantanamo Bay 20 years ago?
The ones who are in charge are quite few, and the many who obey them do so mostly out of conformism or to hide small pettiness. But these few, and we know this from the data they themselves disseminate, really do have an exorbitant power, which increases with new adept individuals whom they appoint to the highest leadership of the institutions. This is not an unbelievable situation. On the contrary, it is extremely simple to comprehend if we consider who owns the media, who finances political parties, who sponsors international institutions, and who gives the balance sheet reliability reports of nations. They are always the same people who are head of a very small number of investment funds and an even smaller number of representatives of usurious high finance. The names are always the same, and we know who they are.
Thank you for this extensive answer. The next question is, it has been a few years since you strongly criticized Pope Francis for lifting penalties against the former Archbishop of Washington, Theodore McCarrick, who is one of the main accused in the abuse scandal of the Catholic Church in the USA. An outrageous act. As a vehement
So watch the rest of that. I found, this is on BitChute. It's on other media. Archbishop Carlo Maria Vigano, if I'm pronouncing it right, Vigano, interviewed by Dr. Reiner Fulnick and Vivian Fisher.
Your Excellency, once again, you are speaking in very dramatic terms about people being used as guinea pigs, about humans becoming chronically ill due to the health measures being taken. And you are asking for us to to resist what you call a type of new totalitarianism. But how could we really come to a united conclusion about the threat we face with so much inability to understand the true facts and to know really what our position truly is? What do you suggest?
I believe that it is important to open people's eyes, showing them the deception we are facing. It is a deception based on false premises, artfully created and imposed in a dogmatic way to legitimize false solutions that have already been planned and implemented. The pandemic was intended to impose a social control that under normal conditions would have been rejected with disdain by the masses, but which, thanks to the media terrorism and the complicity of doctors, politicians, magistrates, and law enforcement agencies, could be introduced in many nations and even in the ecclesiastical institutions themselves. In Santa Marta, the residence where Bergoglio lives, one cannot eat at the cafeteria without a green pass. And in many Catholic schools and universities, the vaccines is required for all staff and students. Soon, they will ask us for the vaccine passport in order to travel, to enter public offices, to vote, and to go to church. I want to be very clear on this point. Without understanding the dimension of the problem, without understanding really the dimension of this problem, without recognizing its author and discerning its aims, we will never be able to get out of it. Because the Lord, in order to come to our head, wants us to recognize the evil that oppresses us and understand what causes it, in order then to be able to ask Him for forgiveness and do penance. And the cause of this hell on earth is having abandoned God, having denied Him in His temporal and spiritual lordship, and having usurped the crown to give it to the enemy. When we understand that the present society, in its delirium of being able to trample on the cross of Christ, has made itself a slave of Satan, only then will we be able to invoke God's mercy and implore His intervention.
Archbishop, you are sketching for us a dramatic confrontation between good and evil. You're speaking of God and the devil. I was wondering if you might go into a little more detail instead of these sort of overarching antagonists on a colossal scale. What can you see in our history, actual facts in recent years and even recent centuries, which led us to this war over the fate of humanity, the identity of man, the goal of human life, and leads us to this stark contrast which you see us facing today?
The answer is far too simple. First of all, as Christians, we know that this epochal war is waged by Satan, the enemy of mankind. Behind the workers of iniquity, there is always and only him, a murder from the beginning. It mattered little whether the cooperator of this plan are pharmaceutical companies or I finance philanthropic, philanthropic organization or Masonic sects, political faction or corrupt media. All of them, aware of it or not, collaborate in the work of the devil. Sin, disease, and death are the unmistakable mark of his work.
I think that's very deep. Okay, this is the date once again. We're here for the evening edition, part two of a prayer against war, a prayer for wars, right? What we see here, Archbishop Carlo Maria calling out, he's like one time. So, once again, if you have ears, hear, listen. If you can see, I see some closed caption here. You can read this, right? Believe it or not, have discernment, but I believe this says a lot. And even the fact that he says it is that simple. I highly agree when at least some person of spiritual leadership, I guess, or education, or enlightenment, be it God given. I like that because it is supposed to be simple, but it is everything as such as the world we live in, very complicated, very convoluted, very even if you want to go mathematical, even if we know and there's ways to use it to our advantage, it's been totally corrupted, even like language, right? So what I would say future saint, because at least if he's right, he's calling it out and he's putting his holy life on the line. So listen, take heed to what he's saying. This guy just asked, what's the deal with God and the devil and all of this? That's basically what he's saying, right? I love that camera shot because it's like, it's obvious it's some type of, well, telecast or maybe online type of cast. He's in the church. He's doing a handheld shot. You can see that. Like they're doing a steady 10 shot, right? He looks like a concerned Muzungu. Nah, he's cool, but he's a concerned white guy. Like, hey, man, you want to tell me about this, bro? I don't know. Yeah, I'm going to ask you straight white man questions. Tell me, will my stocks fall? All right, if you really want to know, it's all about the devil and the blood and the death. And he's like, what? Anyway, let's continue. But here, once again, he has ears, let them hear. Listen to what he says. It's very deep because it's really simple. I like that. It's like when the body is gone, the flesh, right? That's it. That's part of it. That's part of it, right? When you say that's it, the biggest mystery to us on this earth, unless it's actually been shared only but to the few who have known the good and the bad, the yin and the yang, what has happened is they are able to say, well, let's keep it to ourselves because it's a lot of power. But being unconscious of being an actual soul that could do good. And anyway, you know, deep stuff, psychological, once again, trauma, post trauma, all of this, generational curses, right? He's telling you it's simple. You want to love, believe in death, you believe in the afterlife, you can go with God, you can, yeah, if if we want to accept it. And it's not, I believe he's not calling it out like if you're agnostic or atheist. He's like, there's a lot of that too. But I feel, hey, those folks, they're entitled to that. But once again, it's because we believe we're so much of God, or life is maybe not as meaningful, that who can want to believe that, even though it's been convoluted over the ages, the basics are there's a resurrection. Whether that's going to be a reincarnation, we know even then, if it depends if you believe in realms or what, there is a good and a bad to that. It's been illustrated, it's been written about, howbeit, and nobody's coming back to tell us except those who maybe almost made it, right? But except the Masonic ones, they always bring them back. So even that could be false. Using hallucinogenic drugs that make you hallucinate like you're in hell and death, that too. Even for the near death guy, NDA, what is it, neuroscientist, right? He didn't really change. Like he seemed like he knew more, but he only could be like how he was, which was very calculated and tell you as logically as he could, right? Because he would have been made a laughing stock, and he talks about that, right? And so, okay, that's settled. That's what it's all about. But like the Archbishop here is saying, it is about a life and death thing. So you want to go in peace, or do you want to go somewhere that's not? Let's say you reap what you sow, right? And if part of that comes from a force that is not with or God given or God human creation, right? We already know where that goes. So you have humanity on earth that subscribes to that. It's one of those situations like when Moses came back from the mountain with the commandments. He's like, "Hey guys, I'm back. Honey, I'm home. What? A calf? What the fuck?" Right? I'm sure he probably said that. I'm sure, like, you know what, the relation with God is personal, right? I'm sure that when you experience it, I could say, well, at least for me, not, keeping God's prayer life, like my relationship is really personal, despite I can hear outside and see, right? That's why I can listen to like the Israelites. Not all of them make sense at it, but some of them, oh wow, you nailed. I need to hear that. However, it's not gooey, ooey, forgive, and all of that. No, they got that too, but they're telling you something. So I'll listen to that because I've heard the other stuff. I've heard the Catholics, and you know what? He's calling it out. So he's saying, yes, the devil is not just as physical, but it's actually, it could be those 300 people. They followed it, they developed it, they believed in that. Madame Blavatsky, right? The whole picture, Hitler, everything. So I'm just going to just go back for a second. And once again, take these golden nuggets because you probably won't even hear it anywhere. But this guy's like, oh, is there a God? It's like, is it real? Well, he's like telling you, bro, he's giving it to you to the T. Maybe it's even once again, if he's a mole, well, once again. I mean, how come the Pope is not saying anything about it? Anyway, once again, infighting is infighting, right? But he was a murderer. He came here to what is it? To steal, kill, and destroy. Seek, kill, yeah, all that. Whatever, whatever it is, it's not good. And obviously, wherever you're going, or wherever it's going, it's nowhere good, right? So it's simple as that, and that's part of the brainwashing that has happened.
There is always and only him, a murder from the beginning. It mattered little whether the cooperator of this plan are pharmaceutical companies or I finance philanthropic philanthropic organization or Masonic sects, political faction or corrupt media. All of them, aware of it or not, collaborate in the work of the devil. Sin, disease, and death are the unmistakable mark of his work. Of course, sin, disease, and death, not as an evil to be healed, but as a wicked response, as the only alleged remedy to bring life and the material and spiritual health of man. This indeed is a normality for those who no longer live in the economy of redemption, but they are living in the slavery of Satan, who wants to make the effect of original sin irreversible and the sacrifice of Christ ineffective, to the point that the healthy have come to be considered as potential sick people and the plague spreaders as propagator of death, and vice versa. The vaccinated were contagious, as the only people presumed to be healthy, to the point that the clergy themselves dared to put the health of the body before the duty of administering the sacrament and celebrating Mass. The abject cowardice of many priests and bishops during the recent lockdowns.
So he's calling it out like I've never. I heard this actually a month ago, and if you follow on Odyssey, and it was of course part of the whole. What was it? 4 5 hours of what was going on, and he's just a part. And this is how real I was like. If it is once again, because everybody wants to go more conspiracy than deeper, 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 and everything, right? Like why? Like you could watch these trials and you could be like, is this ever going to really be like happen? You gotta have faith and you gotta watch and see. But so far, a lot has been so revealed. Like hearing this once again, you hear it and you're like, he's telling you what time it is. He's saying it's okay. You essentially, folks do not believe that people can have very evil intentions, and thus even if you know what a cult is or whatever, you can just simply tell if it's not so good, if it's about the simple things about death culture, illness, sickness, particularly abuse, right? Whatever deviances and addictions, exactly, right? How many addicts are dying out there on fentanyl, for example, folks that I've worked with and I've seen. And like I know, for I see a lot of those folks, you believe it or not, do believe in a god, right? Because they say to be brave, to be out in the street, sleeping outside in the street, and going through this tyranny, right? And if somebody doesn't make it after shooting up, you could say, oh, well, they should have never. You know what? Most of these freaking people, God bless their souls, some of them were lawyers themselves, man. And it wasn't out of something that like say, would be propagated, that the news always had to show negativity and, oh, they were this. And no, it's just simple people who just got a rough ride and mouth. You can be ostracized, just even like he's saying. The church was even involved in saying, hey, you can't have mass before you take a blast. Imagine that. So that's how weak the human is, right? Thus, even if we have to even question ourselves, it's like, yeah, you can say, well, we can't trust nobody. It's all imperfect. It's all this. It's what? No, not necessarily, because maybe he knows he's putting his life on the line, right? Whatnot. But he's saying this is real in the sense that, okay, if there is a remedy for it, but that remedy has to start by you really doing your due diligence. He's calling it out. Mind you, you don't see this on NBC and ABC and CBC. Oh, no, 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 no. They're not going to go there, but there's going to be hot times coming up. So, yeah, let's just hear a little bit more and we'll move on. Thank you once again. Give a thumbs up or buy me coffee. But he's getting deep here. He's going into the crux, and this is what we're living right now.
Has brought to light a desolate picture of timidity, indeed of betrayal, and of the lack of faith among the members of the clergy, which shows, if ever it were needed, the proportion of the damage caused by the conciliar revolution. Because this is the absurdity of what we have seen happening for a year and a half. The response to a seasonal flu has consisted in prohibition of effective treatment and the imposition of experimental therapies
I just want
in
to
new.
I just want to throw this in. I'll back up in a few seconds. And remember look how he says it. The last couple of years, that was actually part of that whole mind trip, Jedi mind trick control, MK point, all of it together in full effect. Mind you, if I did take the notice that they were gonna they this was in the news that they were gonna put this exercise, right? Just like the military wars that we're seeing right now. I could say, what is it, almost I forgot, I lost track. But when this shit started, right after this whole lockdown, I could swear even on the legacy media, they were saying, yes, it's time for war games and military are going to be showing what, and then next thing you know, ding, 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 this went off. So I'm just saying, he's calling it out in such a way where you have to have discernment, right? Playing with new gene technologies. And these folks, once again, they don't believe that and that's where I guess the ego comes in because they're like, well, you're only here one time, you might as well make the best of it, and we can manipulate you, and we can do this, and you know what? We don't need God anymore because there is no God, right? And if he was here, he would do something in like magic, right? But we can believe in going to space and traveling, time travel, and we're trying so feverishly hard, right, to broadcast this online, which is just a simple frequency. So this is where we're talking about. This is why it's like, yeah, I gotta pause and I gotta even backtrack a bit because it's like, wow, do we really hear? And he's like, it's absurd, right? Because 2 years, had it been even maybe a year before, we wouldn't have gone there. But just before we had the bucket challenge, right? People pouring ice cold water in their heads, and now recently the whatever crane whatever crate run, trying to run up the freaking crane, and all of this shit was going on right after George Floyd and the civil unrest per se, 3.0, right? So it is absurd if you look back in hindsight, and then all of a sudden everybody's staying, and like he's saying, we didn't read the fine print for this experimental, for this emergency, and then all of a sudden everybody, maybe it's a generational thing, I suspect, if you were young enough and gullible enough to go with it because hey, life can only get back to normal, and the risks outweigh the benefits that you have, the benefits of just being existing in this world, right? Oh, that's crazy talk. That's crazy talk. No, it's not absurd. It's not come back to be the same. Absurdity means that yes, look at where we are today, and there's still a lot of folks who are ready to go 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. This town bought how much? 10 picks for one individual. That's more than even what somebody would do, let's say, in hard drugs quantity in that much time in a month. Let's say a month, right? It's like I've seen people doing smack, and nobody cares about even those overdoses because the absurdity is, well, when the lockdowns happened, a lot of folks didn't have access to programs, homeless shelters. They got darn nearly got ostracized if it wasn't for the few programs, right? But once again, you could only imagine what happened to the folks who had depression, the folks who were like maybe even locked up in prison. You could only imagine because even in prison, right? You couldn't go out, you couldn't go out. That even means for that one cigarette, it might have been locked down. Don't go to the gym. Might have been locked down. Stay in. So he's saying because of this absurdity that these folks of confusion created, we lost count of time. You want to call time travel? There we go. Here we are. We got, the last 2 years blurry. We're celebrating something that happened 20 years ago, and there's already feelings about that, right? As we call it, long live the king. We'll look at that in a second. But it's an absurd world, more so absurd, even in a generational sense, because if anything, the numbers that went to do this, considering how quick it happened, and this is where the question of, you know, it's not to feel guilty or feel angry or be upset at ourselves, because even if anybody had gotten a flu shot, this is what I just heard. Even if anybody had gotten a flu shot, even in the last 5, you know what? We probably could have been all chipped up, dipped up. That's why it's not. But this is particular because this is really get it and get how many and so much more. And because he's going to tell you, Archbishop Carlos is going to tell you what's happening, what's going on here, right? But they can't believe in God. They can't. No, no. You can't believe that you are intricately, miraculously made. So because we are so, that's the beauty of God. He gave even to do this DNA shit. You still are gifted. God blessed you, but you decided to use it this fucking way, and it's twisted. Thus, it becomes, because it's material and mineral, it becomes part of this world, right? So absurd indeed. And we're still in it, and we're seeing the absurdity of the psychopathic realm, which is confusing and all that deep stuff. There you go.
what we have seen happening for a year and a half. The response to a seasonal flu has consisted in prohibition of effective treatment and the imposition of experimental therapies with new gene technologies, with why not curing the consequences of the virus, causes, genetic modifications, and side effects, heart attacks, and myocarditis, death of people otherwise healthy or who could recover with the treatment available. And to this is added, like an infernal ritual, the use of a gene serum made with aborted fetuses, as if to renew the human sacrifice of the pagans, a new twist of health, propitiating the coming new order with a life of innocence. And while Christian baptism cleanses the soul of sin and makes us son of God in his sacramental character, the satanic baptism marks those who receive it with the mark of the beast. How Catholics are able to undergo the vaccine as a sort of satanic baptism without any scruple of conscience remains a question to which
Did you just hear? Okay, I want to let it roll for a bit and we're going to move on, right? Because it's been a minute on this part of the show. We'll be right back. Thank you very much for checking out the date. But you hear what he just said? I'm just going to rewind that one more time. And I will not rewind it after that. I'm just going to let it play for maybe another five and we'll move on. But this bro is telling you, if you don't hear what he's saying, and this is a very big point because while everybody tried to move on with their life, right? The lockdown, yeah, especially if you're from a what we call an attention deficit generation, what trauma that did, especially to the children now, babies that came into the world with this, right? Like coming into the world with mask on and they can't go out play with their friends. It's unheard of. Not even in wartime. People went to bunkers, but it was like, okay, this is what okay, there are bombs blowing up. But this was no it wasn't that. This was, as we're hearing, yeah, people got sick. I know that did happen to me, right? And then next thing you know, it turned into something way bigger and we kind of felt we were like, "Ooh, this is what's happening," just like 20 years ago, until once again, if you do the research, you learn the truth, right? So let him continue on this. I'm just saying this is explosive. He's telling you, he's like, so most folks, okay, so we got back, the mandate said, okay, get to 80%, 90%, okay, let's go back to church. Why? Because they were closing down the churches. The churches had to follow a mandate and it was into lockdown, even though the church was like, even Catholic Christian churches, most that, what? Unheard of. And forget about a religious exemptions. It was null and void throughout this whole thing. Because why? Because they say God is not real. If God was real and they believed in the miracle that we are intricately woven like they were, and with at least not all of us are pompous as you, the little ants that we are, right? But hey, we want to get back to normal, have another Christmas, have another New Year's, right? Celebrate another. And you know what? People were out and been to those things, eh? Forget about the news, eh? We saw that. The New Year's rock and roll, whatever kickoff. People were still out there kissing up in every Happy New Year, right? But since then, and I'm not saying this shit's not real. He's saying it's real. It's a bad flu. They put that shit out there. However, the fact that even the churches are now we can go back to church now. You're going to be healthy to go give praise and thanks. Now I've heard the argument, and it's a fair one to give fair to the folks who didn't know, like believe what they know and are not getting in the information. Yes, it's understood that yes, because they do believe God has everything in control, even if they did, and it's a good, I would say, 100% the right way to think. If you are that person who had gotten that, that boost, that new and improved boost, and you're saying, okay, you're learning the truth, and God spares your life, God spare life now, and say, listen, look, you can play Russian roulette with them, and you can visit me earlier, and it doesn't mean I'll have to question you more on your belief in me, right? Because you also have a mind. And who are these people? Do they believe in me? No. So why are you listening? It can go there. But even then, in the innocence, folk can say, well, God's still, and highly likely so. God's probably saying, you know what? It's all good. Yeah, you get a pass. It's gonna hurt your family and yada yada. But you know what? Here we go. Sorry, right? You're part of the plan anyways, predestined, you know how they go on, right? So that's what's happening. And then maybe there's a lot of folks out there who maybe through finding out faith, you're gonna have a choice to be. You got that stuff, you don't know, you're hearing this shit, the stuff is in your body. It's like a ticking yeah, ticking time bomb, some could say, right? You did it unknowingly. You went out there because fuck, people lost homes, they would have lost cars, and that happened. But many folks were like, no. So they didn't think of life like that. It could be maybe old enough to not give a fuck, or you could be young enough to not give a fuck, right? You're young enough, you miss going out to the clubs, and I've noticed the streets ain't better for it. I'm sure, we see the effects. So let me just continue here because he's just telling you. And this is what I find, this is amazing. Before we move on, I'll let it play, right? It's only because these are amazing. I'm blown away. This came out like recently, like in the year, and this doesn't catch fire and nobody's listening. Yes, because of the Catholic Church, but he's actually calling something, and our attention to it is deficit, right? So take a look. Satanic baptisms. Did you hear the words? Can't make this shit up. And if he is, he's a damn good actor.
In his sacramental character, the satanic baptism marks those who receive it with the mark of the beast. How Catholics are able to undergo the vaccine as a sort of satanic baptism without any scruple of conscience remains a question to which an answer must be given. Certainly, decades of systematic cancellation of faith and morals in the faithful, in the name of dialogue with the world and with modernity, have allowed souls to lose all supernatural reference, allowing themselves to be dulled by a formless sentimentality that has nothing Catholic about it. The castration of souls took place at the moment in which the Christian certamen, the Christian combat against the world, the flesh, and the devil, was perverted into an indecorous retreat, indeed into a cowardly desertion. Once soldiers of Christ, many now found themselves to be effeminate courtiers of the adversary.
Your Excellency, once again, you've shocked us with your polarizing language and your dark tones with reference to the.
Bro, you know what? He has a right to be concerned. Look at him. Check that shit out. Look at that. It's like it seeped in. Like he had ears. He's hearing. He's seeing whatever he could see. Right? I'm sure even the cameraman shook. He like, I can't. I know you want tension, bro, but this is like not me moving the camera. This is like some greater power, right? Look at him. You like I love the lighting, and this is where you're like, yeah, okay, you gotta decipher. For real, you gotta have discernment, but he looked like he's sincere, and he's like, look at his face. He's like, holy shit, let me think about this now. I don't know who he is. He's a doctor, but like, for like, let me just turn it back and let's just see like that reaction, right? I think this will even be the cover for the post, but probably not. So here we are. This is Mr. McKennahay, right? He's like the intellectual. And once again, you rock my house and you rock my socks off. You're telling us with your provocative language that, hmm, my white ass is grass along with those other Negroes out there. Is that what you're saying? Because I don't know. I'm going to crap my pants right now. It seems really like, what are you? What? I want to scream, but I'm going to keep it cool because I've got a company to run. So tell me more.
Once again, you've shocked us with your polarizing language and your dark tones with reference to the terrific dangers that you see facing us today, referring to castration, referring to poisoning by medical means. Let's shift the conversation just a bit to look more closely on your area of true expertise, which is the life of the church. You were a leading Vatican official. You were close to Pope Paul VI, to John Paul II, to Pope Benedict, and also to Pope Francis. What do you think has happened to the church that has placed the church today in such a weak position vis-a-vis its...
So this is about popes in the hood, right? I'm just gonna let him play that out. This is the history of like what I was saying. He's saying 200 years. He's gonna probably up it up and amp because this guy was like rolling with his crew, the popes. You can't make this shit up, folks. Thank you for joining the date and enjoying the post. Like, yeah, vis-a-vis. It's a tradition. Let's hear this. All right. I'm gonna call this part Popes in the Hood.
tradition and vis-a-vis the secular world in general.
Like true niggas.
The smoke of Satan entered the church more than 60 years ago with the council. And I would say even earlier. The revolution of Vatican II was possible because it was prepared and organized in the smallest details for decades by traitors who had infiltrated into the Roman Curia, dioceses, universities, seminaries, religious orders. A work of infiltration that has found the highest level of the church inert and unprepared, intoxicated by the winds of novelty, inadequate in the face of the challenges of the modern society, suffering from a sense of inferiority that has led them to believe that they are behind the times and out of fashion. And this we must recognize finds its main cause in the lack of supernatural vision, in having neglected the life of grace for benefit of dissipated activism, of an apostolate which is sterile precisely.
Hold on. I just want to say this. Yeah, which is sterile precisely. So once again, the castrate. He says these words like castration, prolific, right? Sterilization. So okay. I'm not even going to get with the whole biblical angle, but a lot of the churches, especially when it came to what we know, like these seminaries and whatnot, right? Seminaries. In seminaries. And we hear of all the abuses that happen. A lot of the heaviest shit, as we know, especially at least in our contemporary time, happened to the boomers, right? Who were children, mostly growing up in the 40s after the war, right? 40s, and after the war, it was already messed up. It even happened before that. That's been my last. That was the other post, right? The orphan trains. So imagine during wars, and of course the marriage things. Religion really wasn't all as tight as were led to believe. And of course, he noticed he said Vatican II. What Vatican II was about? What? Wait a minute. They put out another album before. What they had like what? Popes, nigga popes with attitude. So that's Vatican One. That's interesting. Like Machiavelli, right? So Vatican II, tour, right? He's telling you in back like 60 years ago. So let's time that. 60 years ago is even a little, probably the youngest of the boomers, definitely by now a Gen Xer, creeping into that easily, Gen Xer, right? Give or take, right? So any baby born from then, and maybe even young person who've been through that, this is the connection, folks. I'll just digress for a second. Like if you go through all those years, what was happening in the world, even with Nam, and we know that was a war that was created by those folks, and already who those folks were after the Kennedys, right? And of course, you hear it in rock and roll song, and then the bikers and that whole satanic oversexed era, right? Because the '60s was the biggest transformation. Even nuns were fucking playing guitar, playing songs, and they had scandal. Nun went and killed herself because she became a rock and roll star, Dominique. Yeah, man, real. And then, there was another nun, I believe, who was popular, and she passed away recently. But, they got into this, right? And we started to see the flying nun and the '60s and the '70s, and, the tongue in cheek. Before, you couldn't just do that. Not really. Even though they have had it, you couldn't really pull parody like that on religion like that. Not that, but it was there, right? They already had their dysfunction. So I just wanted to make a point that, and he's going to probably tell you more, and we'll move on. This is where, if anything, even the young, even some of the boomers that come out now, even natives with all the residential schools, they're all like boomers now, and a lot of them are out there, but I guess maybe once again, they've lost the motivation. But since then, obviously the system has been revamped because there's still a lot of smuggling, maybe not as much in the church, but here we go. This is a whistleblower, and he's saying that in this period, they wanted to keep up with the times. So forget about the commandments. Yeah, let's lay back on. Of course, we know the Catholic Church on, like divorce was one thing. And of course, hey, look at marriage, right? That now you can have, anybody can, if you want, let's say, for example, which is possible, if you want to marry someone who's what we consider underage, which would for me would be like even under like 18. Some countries, some places 16, some places 14, some places 12. That's the fact. These bros can marry them, right? Somebody want to marry an animal, they can do that just now. Just a minute before the church can say, well, you know what? We did worship an animal, like half goat, half man. So yeah, we could pull that off, right? And anything that is not man and wife and husband and wife, man and woman, because we already say that's a novelty. That's not even taboo. That's not a miracle which you guys could do. What we can try and do is, you see this animal and this person, they're gonna get it on, and we're gonna make something happen.
Because it is not nourished by prayer and not nourished by charity, which is the love of God. The same thing happened today in the face of the pseudo-canonical overpowering with which illegitimate limitations are imposed on the right, which even if only considering its antiquity, is in itself exempt from any possibility of abolition. The problem of the conciliar church, which I have said several times, is superimposed over the Church of Christ as the moon covers the sun during the eclipse, is that it has wanted to come to terms with the world. When the gospel teaches us that our destiny is to be hated and persecuted by the world. If the world hates you, said Jesus, know that he hated me before you. If they persecuted me, they will persecute you too. A disciple is not superior to the teacher, not a servant superior to his Lord. The conciliar hierarchy has succumbed to the temptation to choose the easy way of dialogue rather than courageously walking the way of the cross. And this has led it to renounce the proclamation of the gospel, adulterating it, adapting it to the spirit of the world. Let us not forget that Satan is called by our Lord the prince of this world. And yet, faced with the colossal failure of this alleged conciliar spring, one insists with tetragonal obstinacy on the path that has proven to be suicidal. If Vatican II had at least increased the number of the faithful, one could criticize his method, but at least recognize its numerical, if it's not qualitative, benefit. Instead, the so-called opening of the council has not converted a single separated brother, causing the abandonment of an exorbitant number of faithful. Those who remain in the church today have a knowledge of the faith that is almost always full of gaps, incomplete, and erroneous. Their spiritual life is poor, if not completely absent. And the state of grace is annihilated and neglected. I ask myself, where is this resounding success of Vatican II, on the basis of which we should continue on the path he has taken after having abandoned the royal road of the Roman pontiffs follow until Pius XII? Even a human evaluation would be enough to understand the failure of the conciliar ideology and the need to repair the mistake made. And we must ask ourselves, perhaps mercilessly, but still honestly and realistically, if the alleged renewal was nothing more than a pretext behind which was hidden the lucid and malicious intention to destroy the Church of Christ and replace it with a counterfeit, an intention certainly not understood or shared by the majority of bishops, but which emerges clearly and evidently in the action of few organized and efficient traitors.
So this bro here, thank you very much. You can check out the rest on the date on the website. I will throw in a link. But that's been a really good, juicy part of the content of what I did want to cover, right? Because he's telling us that he at least is trying to make a difference, right? He talks about Satan and the devil working his evil through the powerful greed of the elite who are trying to take over the world by using a false pen, right? You got that? And he's upset because people are not opening their eyes and putting their trust in the Lord. So let's make sure and pray that he is going to be okay. And as you see here, this was his Reawaken America rally. He did give a shout out to the ex or the what do you call it now? Because you want to be careful, but the former United States leaders to do something, right? Because I'll just read this thing real quick. Praise be Jesus Christ, dear friends. General Michael Flynn asked me to speak with a message for your rally. I gladly accept his proposal because I wish to reach you and encourage you in this reawakening of consciences. If you are reawakening, it is because you are now, it's because until now, someone has forced you to sleep. Okay, let me see here. All right, forced you to sleep, drugged you, and distracted you from what he was plotting in order to continue undisturbed in his criminal action. But the slumber of Americans and all peoples has lasted far too long. It is now the moment to open our eyes, to wake up, and to understand what has happened and what is happening. It is the moment to act. And so he does have something to say regarding this current war. And I'm not going to read that, but you could take a minute, maybe even pause the page and read it, right? But he's saying um, something that you're never hearing much every day, right? Like he's talking about a corrupt government desired by the globalist cabal, which today finds itself with a cocaine addicted president, a former actor, a dancer who hides billions in tax havens, while the Ukrainian population is among the poorest in Europe, right? It's not it is not a war of the Russian people. For years the Russian Federation has been demanding respect for the Russian speaking minority, black people, black Russians, right? Muslims, all of them, and the international community has always turned the other way. So he tells you straight up, right? He even, I mean, I'll just like some excerpts here. It's not a war of the United States. The Americans fought against Nazism. And it is scandalous that today, current American leader is helping a government that supports and collaborates with extremist groups that hoist the swastika and propagate Nazi ideas. So I'll leave that there. But yeah, this is his, and he hits these guys. Let us have no illusions. These servants of the New World Order, who have managed to occupy the highest positions of national governments and international organizations, are our enemies. Enemies of the good and enemies of God. They do not care how many of us will have to die from the effects of the vaccine, from hunger, or from bombs. They, they are only interested in power, personal advantage, and the advantage of their masters, whom, so far, no one has dared to incriminate and condemn. So he has a few more words, I guess, to say about all of this. Definitely, if you want, you can just come on the date here and you can just download to go, right? And this is why I give you the mundane. So, wow, we had covered quite a bit on this whole thing. Future homework for you: look up Pax Americana, right? Which is Latin for American peace, modeled after Pax Romana, which was roughly a 200-year long time span, 200-year long time span of Roman history, which is identified as the period and as a period and as a golden age of increased as well as sustained Roman imperialism, relative peace, and order. Right? Good stuff. And Pax Britannica was the period of relative peace between the great powers during which the British Empire became a global hegemonic power and adopted the role of a global policeman, also called long police, right? Unprecedented, described as the Pax Americana, is a term for the unprecedented historical period following the end of World War II in 1945, which is to the present day, maybe, maybe not, to be continued, right? The period of the Cold War, 1945 to 1991, was marked by the absence of major wars between the great powers of the period. So that's why I can also hashtag that and say peacetime. So all of this is a term applied to the concept of relative peace in the Western Hemisphere, and later in the world after the end of the Second World War, or of World War II in 1945, when the United States became the world's most, or the world's dominant economic military power. In this sense, Pax Americana has come to describe the military and economic position of the United States relative to other nations. The Marshall Plan, right, enacted in 1948 to provide foreign aid to Western Europe. The United States transferred over 13 billion in economic recovery programs to Western European economies after the end of World War II. Almost sounds familiar what's happening now, except it's kind of reversed, right? Play, you're already pay to play. All right, so to rebuild the economies of Western Europe, which has been described as the launching of the Pax Americana. So you guys can read into that and see what what good does it do today, but you that's why you're here. So look at Pan Africanism, a brief intellectual history. Yes, there's a lot to, you can also research on that, but we're not going to. We're just going to continue into it. And from there, we'll look into a little bit about how, well, there's no Pan Africanism. And of course, all of that to say there's no fight, there's no bite. And we're pretty tame. But things will change soon enough because, right, as we are here to see for the date, um, we're learning more and more about what's really going on. And part of my job here is to let you guys tune in to what needs to be known, such as like this, right? The International Court of Justice. On September 7th, 2022, the United States of America filed a declaration of intervention under Article 63 of the Statute of the Court in the case concerning allegations of genocide under the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide, Ukraine versus the Russian Federation. So this was filed at the International Court of Justice. So let's take a look here. Let's check out the website. We always do our due diligence. This is the International Court of Justice, which has its seat in The Hague and is the principal judicial organ of the United Nations. So, I mean, you could look in and find out a little bit about the history. Um, and the frequently asked questions. So let's just take a quick break and we'll take a look into it. Once again, welcome. Thank you very much for checking out the date.
Careful out there.